Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me out there? Left side, can you hear me? Right side, over here. We hear, how about up there? All right, all right. Thank you for coming. My name is Manuel Santamaria. I am the VP of Community Action here at the Community Foundation, and it is my honor to welcome you to the Mountain View Center for the Performing Arts. This is our 13th annual meeting here in San Mateo and Santa Clara County, so thank you for coming. I'm so happy to see so many friends, old and new, after 3 years of looking at those little square boxes, right? Those Zoom boxes. They're here to stay, but it's all right. We're here. Thank you for coming. And before we start, I'd like to actually ask you to turn to the person next to in front behind you and just welcome them, greet them, say hello, come on, we're here, 30 seconds. Thank you for that. Thank you. I know you want to keep doing it, and we will. We will. I know we're really anxious to do this, but we will continue to do this after our program. So thank you for doing that for me. Please find your seats. Thank you. This annual meeting is the Foundation's signature event. This is the signature event for us where we bring together all sectors of the community, public, private, social sector, to talk about, to discuss about pressing issues out in the community. The themes for today are racial justice, building community, and advancing economic equity here in Silicon Valley. And we think that these are the principles, these are the themes that will make our community grow even stronger. A few housekeeping notes. I would just want to say thank you to the SVCF's planning committee. Where are you guys? Just wave. Thank you so much for making this event happen. Thank you to the Mountain View Center for Performing Arts staff for making all of this happen as well. And we couldn't be here without the people that are serving us, the food, the drinks that are outside, actually. So thank you for doing that for us today. And I'd like to take a moment to thank our champion sponsors for today: Alaska Airlines, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, Matthew Ives with Morgan Stanley. Thank you for doing so. Thank you for being our champion sponsors. And as I mentioned at the top, I see so many familiar faces, old and new, and I just want to say thank you to two groups specifically today. And if you can hold your applause, we've got a great group of elected officials today, and I will name them, and please hold your applause. The first one is Assemblyman Ash Clara, Lucas Ramirez, who's the mayor of Mountain View, Margaret Avekova, council member, Mountain View, Patricia Showalter, council member, Mountain View, Rick DeGolia, mayor of Atherton, Carmen Montano, Vice Mayor of Milpitas, Rick DeGolia, Mayor of Atherton, like I said, Hung Wei, which is Council Member of Cupertino, Davina Hurt, Council Member Belmont, Nisa Flagor from Los Altos as a councilwoman, Noela Corso, who is a trustee of the San Mateo Foster City School District, Council Member Dev Davis, San Jose, and Alexander Lynn, Policy Aide of Santa Clara County Supervisor Cindy Chavez. Thank you. And of course, like I said, this event would not be possible without the input and the guidance from 22 individuals who make up our Community Advisory Council. These individuals have committed to actually providing guidance, not only to Nicole, but to staff about the work that we do and how we do it. And I'd like to mention who are here. Andrea Chapman, who's the founder and CEO of Unity Care. Anita Reese, Executive Director of the Pacifica Resource Center. Melissa Jones, Executive Director, Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center. Pastor Marilyn Bussey, St. James AME Zion Church in San Mateo. Mr. Walter Wilson, Silicon Valley Minority Business Consortium. And Sahra Billu, who is the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Thank you for doing all that. Finally, with housekeeping, please turn off your phones, put them on mute. Tablets as well. Just take a couple of seconds to make that happen so that we can have a great conversation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage a graduate of the University of Denver, the former KPMG senior partner in charge of audit for Northern California Business Unit, which includes Honolulu, and one of the few people that I know that have actually gotten on a bike, traversed 10 states through 88 days, over 4,500 miles on a bicycle, our Silicon Valley Foundation president, or actually, not the president, but the board chair, Mr. Wade Liu.
Thank you, Manny. I think I just got promoted. You know, on behalf of the board of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, I want to welcome you all. This is so exciting to be in person. I'm excited, but I was also a little scared when I came today. I said, do I have a suit that doesn't have moth holes in it? I found one. I think Nicole found the one that had moth holes in it. But anyway, Nicole, our CEO, will give you more information about what's been happening at the foundation, but the bottom line is it's all good. And what I want to do is thank all of our, it is. I want to thank all of our team members at the Community Foundation for all their hard work over the last 3 years. It has been, as you know, I'm stating the obvious here, chaotic, crazy, but it also presented a lot of opportunities for us. So thank you to our team members. Really appreciate it. Also, and this is like Manny was thanking a lot of people, this is the thank you section, right? So I also want to thank all of you coming tonight, all of our donors, and our not-for-profit organizations, and our community folks coming today and doing what you can do to help our community be the best that it can be. Now, given some of the deep divisions in our society, we think meeting in person is really key. And so we're so glad we can do this today in person. Now, as you all know, we support a lot of not-for-profit organizations and issues. But today, as Manny said, we're going to be focusing on this theme of achieving equity in Silicon Valley. So what I'd like you to do is think about that as you're hearing our panelists and our speakers today. What can we do, we all do, to help achieve equity in Silicon Valley? Lastly, I would like you to help us communicate what we do in achieving equity. Because here at the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, this is where transformation happens. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you, Wade. Now it's my honor to present to you members of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe to give us a blessing and name our presence in these ancestral lands. I want to welcome to the stage Julie, Yaya, and Ezekiel Dominguez. Welcome.
Makimak Muwekma, Wuwulam, Akoit Makwarep, Mane Makiswi, Jorge Tuhi, Kanakraka Julie Dominguez, Kanahini Dolores Sanchez. We are Muwekma Ohlone. Welcome to the lands where we are born. Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Dominguez, and I come from the Dolores Sanchez lineage of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area. Here with me today with Nicole, my children's Ezekiel and Josiah Dominguez. Muwekma Wuwulam Warep Tashu, our Muwekma Ohlone tribal land acknowledgement. Horshetuhi, well, we would like to recognize that while we come together in the city of Mountain View, we are gathered on the ethno-historic tribal territory of the Taymyyn Ohlone dialect-speaking tribal groups of the Santa Clara Valley, which includes the lands of the intermarried Puichuns, Alsans, Taymyans, Matalans, and the Paleños, whose tribal region was named after their powerful chief, Captain Pala, and the 2 Mexican land grants located in the East Hills above San Jose, and who were intermarried with the direct ancestors of some of the lineages enrolled in the Muwekma Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area. The city of Mountain View is also the location of one of our 4 Mission Santa Clara Ohlone land grants, which was issued to Clareño Ohlone Indian Lope Inigio Rancho Polosimi y Positas de Animas, Little Wells of Souls, surrounding Moffett Field. The present-day Muwekma Ohlone tribe, with an enrolled Bureau of Indian Affairs documented membership of over 600 members, is comprised of all of the known surviving Indian lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay region. And we trace our tribe's ancestry through the Misionikma, Mission Santa Clara, the Taymyyn, San Francisco, and San Jose, during the advent of the Hispano-European Empire in Alta California, beginning in AD 1769, Muwekma Suyakma, our Muwekma Ohlone families are the successors and living members of the sovereign, historic, previously federally recognized Verona Band of the Alameda County, and now we are formally recognized as the Muwekma Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area. In our native Chocheño Ohlone language, Muwekma means la gente, the people. And the lands on which the city of Mountain View is established was and continues to be of great spiritual significance and historical importance for our Muwekma Ohlone tribal people and our other familiar descendants of the Verona Band. We recognize that every member of the greater Mountain View community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since it was incorporated in 1902. Consistent with our values of community, inclusion, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make known through various enterprises that the city of Mountain View's relationships to Native peoples. And as members of the Mountain View community, it is vitally important that we all recognize that not only that the land on which we live, work, and learn, but we also recognize that our Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and we are thriving members of the Mountain View, Santa Clara County, and broader Bay Area communities today. We would like to thank the Santa Clara Valley Community Foundation for inviting the Muwekma Ohlone tribe to read this Muwekma Ohlone tribal land acknowledgement at your annual meeting. And we would like to also thank for everyone who's in of support. And if you are not sure on how to, please stand in solidarity for our reaffirmation for federal recognition and visit muwekma.org for more information. Thank you. Aho.
Thank you, Julie, Yaya, and Ezekiel for reminding us of our long-standing history here in Santa Clara County and San Mateo County. Now, you know, part of the work that Julie has been doing is really, it's historical, it's deep, right? It's telling the story of who we are and how we landed here. But it's also, you know, a story of our ancestors and about the future that we hold in order to make sure that the betterment and the healing of our society continues. So, in that spirit of storytelling, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, which is going to remind us about how important it is to reclaim our voice, you know, as a people. Please welcome to this stage a member of the New Yorker National Poetry Slam Team, the Poetry Lounge Slam Team, and the grand champion titleist from San Francisco and Hollywood. But most importantly, the 2022 Santa Clara County Poet Laureate, Tshaka Campbell, to the stage. Hello, my friend.
Silicon Valley, how we doing? We're about to change the world. Silicon Valley, how are we doing? Okay, much better, much better. All right, so I'm gonna do a poem for you guys. It's actually a story, so I guess a storm or a Pori or something like that, but I'm gonna come into it sort of halfway through, but I want to set the stage, right? Imagine, you know, 30, 40 years in the future, and it turns out that sound is illegal, right? It's just been indoctrinated that sound is illegal. People sort of get their their sound by using needles to inject and remove the sound from a wasp's buzz. And that's what they sell as currency. So just kind of setting the stage. And then there's two older poets that were around, and so that's where I'm going to start my story. This is our music now. The absence of sound caresses our ears like a geisha with cotton hands, and at least for those that still have ears. See, evolution has a way of correcting things we don't use naturally, like ears, like voices, like words. Words now gifted to dictators with abyss hearts. And these two fading poets, they used to love words. They used to sell them 30 years prior in the same cafe. They used to skin them like fishmongers, deboning their genealogy. Now, all they can do is explain this life in hand gestures and sit still with their magic removed. Inhaling the braided perfume of chai lattes and hydroponic coffee grinds, their imaginations are now castrated angels forgetting how to enunciate their souls, freedom screwed into a concrete grave, and they are young and wrinkled. The scars we left behind in the womb of mankind, waiting for something to pour into like human jaws, and for a moment, tick, tick, tick. An hourglass alarm clock blinks in the background, 57, 58, 59. Boom! And then, like a supernova, they explode into a gyration of swirling screams. They yell out, the sound circling their spines like DNA parables, spelling eternity. They spoke in galaxies, in old, in wet, like new miracles unearthed and unabashed. Their tongues were still fat from incubating planets in their mouths for 3 decades now, so they are still unfamiliar to the sound of their own voices, to their own God. So they click awkward between each lucid sentence. We are click, the descendants of an imaginary future click, muted, not no more, return from this unholy click. We are not muted. A nanosecond later, they pour into the street, chanting in sublime synchronicity. We are not mutes. We are spitting gypsies, nomads carrying dreams to places only our stings can recall. We be because we say we are. An arsenal of twisted tongue witch doctors, toe-tagged and ready to give death back to the dying, made from the ground bones of Click, Milton, Langston, Kubert, Suhair, Click, McKay, Byron, Blake. They shake. Ellams, Abrams, Williams, Edwards, LaRose, Heron, Click, Garvey, Angelou, Cootie, Shelley. We be a soothsayers of Luthig paradigms, loosely with loose-leaf skin and veins for lines. So we write in 12-point blood and cursive flesh, barbed wire sewn through our throats to ensure that we swallow pain and speak plasma. Give us back what you have taken. We have evolved this language into a palisade of shape-shifting illusion, a trend, a belief, a stand for and stand on. Click, a stand for and stand on. Spoken, broken, brave to our children. See, the future needs to hear the fire crackle through our teeth. Let us speak, dream, live. Click, let us dream, speak, live. Look at us. We have extracted the Machiavellian from your promise of immortality and still hold the syllables of God in our womb. How can you silence what we are? We are poetry, life spoken in razor blades, a voice box made of unpublished concertos harvested by time machines. Click, now we are poetry. Click, 30 years ago we were poetry. Click, and 30 years from now we will be poetry. Click, poetry. Click, poetry. Click. And as quickly as they begun, they end in mid-rampage. Their tongues are torn from their mouths and fall to the ground. Plasma-filled spiders emerge from the space that was. Their words echo as sound dealers descend on them in an attempt to capture whatever sounds may still be left in their bodies. But it's too late. It's too late. The seed has been sown. The vibrations travel the underground like a runaway slave. And two poets, 30 years from now, reclaim all of our voices. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Give it up, Tshaka Campbell, 2022 Santa Clara County Poet Laureate. Come on, Tshaka. If you want to find out more about Tshaka, TshakaCampbellPoet.com. Tshaka is Tshaka, TshakaCampbellPoet.com, or follow him on Instagram, Papa Shack, at Papa Shack. So as I mentioned at the top of our program, the theme of this year is Connect, Reflect, Act, building power and seeking justice in our region. We felt that this theme was fitting for SVCF, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, as we also have pivoted not only our practices, but the way that we connect with the community and the way that we try and think and get guidance from leaders and organizations in our community to address the structural inequities that exist in Silicon Valley. So it is my pleasure to also tell you that the next panel of participants, of speakers today, will talk about what does it mean to build power? What does it mean to actually be working with community, in community, together to solve some of these crazy, crazy issues that we have? Please join me in welcoming Gina Dalma, our Executive VP at the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Come on, Gina, you can come out. She will be moderating a panel. Poncho Guevara, who's the Executive Director of Sacred Heart Community Services. Shireen Malekafzali, Chief Equity Officer, San Mateo County. Roxana Shirkhoda, Zoom. And Dr. Jennifer Taylor-Mendoza. Welcome to the stage. Take it away, Gina.
Manny, you so have a second career in you right there. Hello, everyone. What an absolute delight to be here with you today in person. We are community people. This fills our soul. It really fills our soul. And we are so just thankful that you decided to spend your afternoon with us. So I'm thrilled to moderate today's conversation with a powerful group of leaders and equity champions. We hope that our panel really helps all of us connect, reflect, and together act to build a more just and a more equitable San Mateo and Santa Clara County. So with that, let me introduce you to our panelists, and they all have extensive, long bios. So because we want to make sure that we spend our time in conversation, I will introduce them briefly, and then in that same vein, ask you to hold your applause till I've introduced the four of them. So first, I'd like to welcome Shireen Malekafzali. Shireen is San Mateo County's first ever Chief Equity Officer. And in her role, Shireen supports the county to build more equitable structures, policy, practices, and procedures in order to advance equitable outcomes for communities. Then let me introduce you to Dr. Jennifer Taylor-Mendoza, who is the 10th president of the College of San Mateo. And Dr. Taylor-Mendoza has over 2 decades of higher education teaching and administrative experiences, working to create a more equitable educational system for all students. I'm also incredibly pleased to welcome Roxana Shirkhoda, who is the head of social impact at Zoom. In her role, Roxana mobilizes the company's resources for good. Roxana and her team put the full weight of Zoom's platform, dollars, employees, and voice behind a commitment to foster equity, democratize opportunity, and address some of humanity's biggest challenges. And finally, we're delighted to be joined by Poncho Guevara. Poncho is the Executive Director of Sacred Heart Community Service, a grassroots anti-poverty organization based in San Jose. And by cultivating and creating bridges between diverse constituencies, Poncho and his team have helped develop and lead campaigns addressing critical issues in workers' rights, children's health care, homelessness, affordable housing, and immigrant rights. Please join me on a huge round of applause for our phenomenal panel. So to help us frame the conversation, I I want to start by asking Poncho and Shireen the same question. Poncho, you've been in this fight for a long time. What is...
Thanks, Gina.
We've been in this fight together for a long time. How's that? What is the major barrier for our communities as they seek to advance equitable outcomes in our region?
I think it's 3 words: a lack of commitment. And that lack of commitment comes from some really deep-seated things that we're struggling with as a community. One is the failure to really reconcile or deal with the fact that we live in a society that is infected by something we call white supremacy culture. And so white supremacy culture is a form of racism that's based on a belief that white people are superior to people from other racial backgrounds. And that is reflected in the systems that reinforce white domination in political, economic, and social spheres. So the biggest obstacle, Gina, is that we can't really grapple with an issue that infects all of us in a deep way, that we don't stand up and scream when we look at these incredibly disparate outcomes of what people are experiencing in our community. It's not just the policies that exist that reinforce these systems that separate people, but the fact that some people just think it's normal. It's the water that we swim in, it's the air that we breathe. We don't even think about it because it just seems normal that some people are privileged over others because of the background. And so for us to not recognize that, for us to deal with these inequities, to look at the idea of equity just means giving people what they need to thrive, what they need to support their families, what they need to be able to make things happen. That's not the same as equality. Treating everyone equally is not the same as equity, because equity means that we have to correct against what has actually reinforced these systems of white supremacy in our community. So the major barrier is getting over that idea that lives with so many of us. And if we have that idea in ourselves that this is not right, when we see children of color that experience something far different in their education system, families struggling in a way in terms of wealth and housing stability that's far different based on race, if we don't wake up and say, this is a problem that we have to reconcile, that's the biggest barrier we have to overcome.
Thank you, Poncho. Shireen, let me ask you the same question, but from your perspective as a public servant.
As a public servant, I don't know if I see, I don't know if our diagnosis would be different necessarily. We're both equity advocates. We're just practicing in different spaces. And I would say, to add to Poncho's really good start, I would add maybe 2 things around really how it manifests. One is around our hourglass economy that really strains and squeezes so many in our community. And the second is around how that translates into challenges with having a truly inclusive democracy. And so if we think about our hourglass economy, the Brookings Institute has a metro monitor, and they look at the very large metro areas. There's 53 of them across the nation. We have 2 of them right here in the Bay Area. We are first and second for prosperity, and yet we're 50th and 53rd, that's last, for racial inclusion in that prosperity. So shared prosperity is not actually a language that we know how to speak here yet. We know how to implement yet. And that creates a situation where there's a differential of power, ultimately, where you have people who are really squeezed to just make it to a PTA meeting, maybe because they're working 2-3 jobs and really trying, and others who may be able to have a lot more relational power, a lot more economic power, a lot more positional power that they could flex towards into our democratic processes. And so our democracy really has to have some safeguards and supports to engineer a way in which we can get closer to government by the people for the people. And what that looks like is often really reliance on community-based organizations that are really building power and support in our most impacted communities for inequities, and that includes things that Poncho is working on to really make sure that people have a touch point into the interests, their own interests, and then help identify and channel that into how our democracy works so that we in government can hear those voices. Another key thing is we have now the REACH Coalition. I'm not sure if any of you are here today. It is a coalition of elected officials of color, and they've come together in recognition that there needs to be more nurturing and fostering and a sense of belonging for candidates of color, but also to maintain representation in the discourse of candidates as well. And so that's a different way of organizing power and thinking about that inclusion. And as a government entity, we want to expand and have a more inclusive economy, democracy, by doing community engagement. That's obviously not the same as power building, but we want to make sure that those that are most impacted by inequities have a central voice in decision-making processes, and we're working towards that and building and expanding that within our county system.
Thank you, Shireen. So we intentionally wanted to build this multi-sector panel because we believe that the fight for a more just and equitable Silicon Valley is not the job of a single sector. So I would love to ask each of you what you're doing to contribute to this fight for a more just and equitable Silicon Valley. And before we do that, Shireen and Poncho, you both mentioned power building, right? Poncho, you've already defined equity. My question to you, then let me turn it over to you quickly, is what is power building, and why is it so incredibly important towards this fight?
About 14 years ago, Sacred Heart Community Service, we decided that there was a very different way of approaching the work, because we were serving tens of thousands of people in need, including a lot of folks that were deeply housing insecure or unhoused.
Direct service.
We were doing that direct service, and it touches so many lives, but ultimately we need to be in the business of putting ourselves out of business. And that means, and we talk about that a lot as a sector, but what does it really mean to actually look at these underlying systems, and how do we center voices in a different way and try to push for change? We started adopting a number of ideas around community organizing. The idea of people with lived experience who are actually they're experiencing the issues that compound their suffering, putting them at the center of conversations, dialogues about how do we change things in our lives. And I was thinking about a family that we started working. We started about 10 years ago. We started the Sacred Heart Housing Action Committee. And at the first meeting, there was a couple, Tony and Tina, who actually came to that meeting, and they themselves had been, were unhoused. They had been living between motels and the streets for years, and they started getting involved in this committee of other people, some advocates, some people lived in affordable housing, and when Tony actually went to go fight as part of this issue and spoke before the city council for a housing impact fee, which would generate tens of millions of dollars ultimately for building more affordable housing. And he related back to us, like, I feel like I did something. I feel like this is something where I made a difference and my life has some worth. And hearing that was crushing, because everyone should feel like their life has some worth. Tony and Tina, for the next few years, continued to bounce back and forth between motels and the streets. And that committee of people that were working together on that issue became that support system that gave them solace and sometimes offered some money or a place to stay at night, and being able to kind of work together. They eventually found a place to stay in the neighborhood, and in the Sacred Heart neighborhood. But a $1,000 rent increase ultimately pushed them out of the area. Ultimately made them, like they were evicted because their landlord wanted to be able to do that. They found a place to stay in the Central Valley, and I'm happy to say that they remained housed and stable, to this day. But they were displaced from our community. The reason I share that story, like what is power building, is power building begins with these basic concepts of people who are closest to the pain, that are experiencing these issues, are the ones that have the solutions and whose power and voice needs to be at the center of all these decisions and what we're doing. And by starting with those individual voices and those people that are there and helping to have institutions, not just one organization, but many organizations that are able to band together to be able to fight and communicate with elected officials and to be able to challenge and understand the systems that are holding them back, that are keeping our communities in a state of deprivation, is ultimately the solution that we need to be able to not only do on an organization by organization, a person to person level, but be able to scale up and be able to knit those different communities together in different ways. We realized in our work on issues of immigrant rights and tenant rights and affordable housing in particular, that we weren't going to be able to win any fight on our own. So the idea of bringing organizations together, learning together from lessons, bringing our constituents together, and helping to build and affirm people's human dignity by putting them at the center of these conversations is how you are knitting together an apparatus of building power. And over the last 2 years, there are many organizations the last several years have been looking at the concept of racial injustice, of racial inequities that exist in our community, and how do we collectively build power by not only working on our own to fight or speak out, but get our constituencies involved and build those bases of power, and then bringing people together at times has been something that's been a dream for many of us for many years. And over the last couple of years, we've been able to work with the Sacred Heart and the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, where I've been proud to sponsor and bring together conversations around racial inequity, especially after the murder of George Floyd, that galvanized a lot of other people. It's like, we need to be bringing ourselves into this fight. How do we do that? Like, we've been complicit for too long. And we built the Race Equity Action Leadership Coalition that has dozens of organizations that are working on a daily, weekly basis and meeting and fighting for a number of different levels. But what's been exciting about that is not just the fact that organizations are banding together and writing letters or advocating and going to council meetings or board of supervisors meetings and challenging some of the pieces that are there, but a real commitment to look at inside of ourselves. What is our collective complicity in this? What are we doing that is just about protecting our resources and our own bases of power and our own jobs? But what are we doing to really dismantle these systems of white supremacy culture in our community? That process of centering those voices, of putting people at the heart of these decisions and being in solidarity with those communities is really at the base of what we're talking about in terms of building power and leveraging that together and being in relationship with individuals in government, in our corporate allies and other folks, and finding folks in education and higher education is really at the heart of how we need to be doing this, because not one sector, not one organization, and not even philanthropy, Gina, is going to be able to unlock the changes that we have to see happen.
Could I start by saying this was a multi-sector panel? Actually, we at the foundation have been so incredibly inspired by the work of building power that we have, we've began using the term of community-centric. Everything we do is community-centric because we understand that without putting the community at the center and actually funding that power building, any change that happens on the ground will not be sustainable, right? So I truly appreciate the inspiration for that. Shireen, you were brought on to the board, to the County of San Mateo, to build its infrastructure and actually help implement the strategic plan and the equity goals that were so explicit there. Could you share with us some of the county's progress since you started? What have been some of the major challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the biggest progress was, frankly, the recognition that there was a need for a position like mine. I think leadership really saw, and especially through the painful eyes of COVID, that these inequities were absolutely front and center, and that we were not well equipped to really handle all of what was coming at us, and we needed to really elevate the level of prioritization around equity. So I really commend our leadership for that. And one of the first things that our Board of Supervisors did under the leadership of Supervisors Slocum and Supervisor Canepa was pass a racial equity resolution. And that resolution really, it recognized the depth of institutional racism and inequities that were in San Mateo County, and the role that government had been playing to both create those historically, but also maintain them. Without deep and intentional focus on overcoming those, we were not going to make any change. So transformation was required, and it actually had very specific actions listed in it. It was not performative. It said specifically we need to create infrastructure. They directed staff to create this infrastructure, and so one of the first things I did was get that in partnership with our board. We also built an interdepartmental core equity team. So just as a reminder, our county structures are very diverse. We have about 7,000 staff, anywhere from the sheriff, the DA's office, probation, all the way to a full running public hospital, the Department of Agriculture, a controller's office, the treasurer, social services. So it's just very vast cultures that run within the different departments. And one of the things that we did as a collective coming together was build the first ever countywide racial and social equity action plan, which had 25 departments committing to specific actions they would take within their departments and specific metrics around equity. And it started with department directors working with their teams. We now have 10 departmental equity teams, which is really exciting, as well as the countywide team. And what we did from there then is really build this eight interdepartmental initiatives that said, how are we going to, there's no special initiative that could ever overpower the resources, the staff, the structures that we have. Our work is to really tear those layers down and bring an equity lens to transform each of our systems and structures. That's the power that we can bring. No 110 special initiative on the side of that structure will ever create the opening and opportunity needed for us to see different outcomes. So what we've done is really spend the time to build tools for our staff, like a community engagement toolkit with an equity lens for all staff. We have built an equity impact assessment toolkit for staff, a glossary of terms, a learning portal. We built an equity data portal. We built out foundational training on equity, numerous ways in which staff can really bring themselves up to speed with where things are, pick up tools if they don't have them on their own, and really run with it. And while that's been our approach, we've also have been doing some external efforts with partners that I do want to lift up. Things like working with the library and our BHRS, Office of Diversity and Equity, to put together a series with lots of our community partners, some of which are in this room today, to really share the experiences and history of our Black, Indigenous people of color to a much wider audience, to recognize what does it mean to have Filipino culture, what is the history of Filipino culture. Many people don't know about that, but it's a huge part of who we are in San Mateo County. But the narrative of who we are does not necessarily always represent the 64% people of color. So we really are working on trying to shift that, bringing community voices to Board of Supervisor meetings. So that narrative of who the county is really there. And most significantly, though I do want to elevate the support that Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Gina in particular, gave us for something that was incredibly important. We, the county was at the front lines of the COVID response, and the federal government was essentially bringing down large amounts of money, ultimately approximately $150 million, to us to backfill some of the response and to move forward with responding to what did people need from the recovery. And this was at a time we're all busy still responding, and with the resources that Silicon Valley Community Foundation was able to provide us in a timely way, really quickly, because you have to act on these quickly, we were able to do a very intense community engagement process to hear from our most impacted communities very intentionally about what their priorities for that funding were. How did they want us to spend that money? We did focus groups in partnership with trusted leaders. We had posters at places we thought we wouldn't have reached, like at Mirancho grocery store, at our taqueria in Pescadero, at a homeless shelter, at the senior center. We also did surveys in 7 languages. We held forums at nights and days and weekends. All of those things to put together a list of the top needs from our most impacted community members and really allocate those funds in relation to what the community told us was most important. And in fact, going beyond that, Silicon Valley Community Foundation gifted us support from a consulting firm who was also helped us draw down as much money as possible from the federal government efforts that were underway, something that we would, again, not be able to ramp up quick enough to do, and gave us some best practices for the allocation and programming of those dollars. I do want to really thank you all for that support, but our intention is to do much more community outreach and really be able to hear from our most impacted community members, really centering them in and their needs and aspirations in the decisions that we make.
Thank you so much, Shireen. Roxana, you've heard terms like power building, power sharing, white supremacy, systems of racial oppression. My question to you is, how easy or not is it for a global company to work within those terms?
Thank you, Gina. I would be remiss to be on the stage and be having a conversation about power shifting and power building and not recognize one of the largest movements to shift power happening right now in Iran. So I just want to acknowledge that piece. I think when we see people get fed up with and hit a tipping point, the mobilization that can happen shouldn't have to get to that point, right? Folks shouldn't have to reach a boiling point and physically put their lives on the line and sacrifice their lives, especially at such a young age, and we're seeing that right now. And I think when we talk about complacency in the social movements that we're trying to see progress in, what would we have to get pushed to make a change, right? And I think for some people that was COVID, that was a tipping point. And I think for others, they haven't hit it yet. And so I think when I consider corporations and their role in adapting to and mobilizing around these paradigms of power building and power shifting, I think we're past due. I don't think we should wait for a boiling point or a tipping point anymore. I think that our customers, our employees, our investors expect it of us. And it's not only the right thing to do, it's effectively being demanded of the private sector. And I think that can be maybe your catalyst moment, if you need to find one, is to recognize the demand is there. But I don't think that we can afford any longer, just based on the state of our communities and their needs, and the state of the planet, frankly, to wait any longer. And for us at Zoom, that kind of not only acceptance of, but living into these notions of power shifting and power building, I'd categorize in 2 different ways. One is showing up in how we do our work. And we have a few different pillars. We do have charitable dollars that we move philanthropically. We've got a technology platform that we are eager to and generously give away for free to ensure folks can maximize to drive impact. We have our employees. And we also talk about the notion of power, that we hold power to leverage our brand, our network, and our platform to drive impact with that power being taken seriously. And so those are some of the kind of pillar areas. But if I talk about philanthropy for a second, from the get-go, we've been very intentional to say shifting power in our position would mean that we don't make the decisions outright. We invite folks from within the community who are issue area experts on the topic areas that we are identifying as critical to invest in. And we have those folks come together effectively as an advisory council. And then we don't even steward that group. We hire a racial equity focused and philanthropic expert outside firm that comes in and navigates that group of advisors through a really rigorous process where those folks are around the world coming together and discussing what's most pressing in their community. These folks represent their communities, they have lived experience, they have the expertise in the issue areas, and they come back and they recommend the groups for us to fund. We've done that now 3 or 4 times, forgive me, I've lost track, and we've had organizations be recommended to us that we would never have funded. There's no way we would have found those organizations. And we did specifically ask this group to consider a few variables. We didn't want these groups to be massive, so they're all groups under $5 million in size and grassroots in nature. They're organizations that are all we call representative-led. They come from the communities they serve and represent those communities with lived experience. These groups have typically not received corporate checks before, so they're not in the Silicon Valley Rolodex of nonprofits who we all love to fund, which is super important, but we try to push outside of those boundaries and ask ourselves, why have these groups not received corporate checks yet? Someone has to for that floodgate to open. And it might be that they have a strong position on not accepting corporate dollars, which we absolutely respect if that's their boundary. We don't assume they want our money. We have conversations with groups who tell us we haven't chosen to take funds, but based on our discussions, they're willing to. Oftentimes we're the first corporate check that they accept, and we want them to take that risk, but we take that risk very seriously and know that we hold ourselves to a high standard in them doing that with us. The grants are unrestricted. There's no application process, there's no rigorous reporting processes, and we're not asking a lot of them. So we're trying to be really thoughtful in how we got to them. They'll kind of be like, how did you find, like sometimes they think the email they're getting about the grant is fake, and they won't answer. And then we'll have to follow up and be like, this is a real email, like, please, like, can we get on a call? We're real people, here's our LinkedIn profiles, like, can we please chat? And it's so jarring and shocking for some of these folks, and we don't want that to be the norm, right? We appreciate and humbly, it fuels us to hear reactions from folks that the way that we got to them is meaningful to them, that it was through this advisory process. And this, the second thing I'll call out is kind of the who we fund. So I've talked about, right, grassroots groups. I think that the piece there that's important is when we work with these groups, we're cognizant of the weight and the pressure that they're under. They are dealing themselves with the challenges oftentimes that they're trying to solve through their organizations. So we take an approach where we kind of step back and say, we're not going to be this traditional funder that's asking you all these questions and wants to constantly have meetings with you. We kind of fund them and say, we're going to get out of the way. Like, you might not hear, but these are multi-year grants. We've got time. You don't need to figure out how to set up a bunch of calls with us at the onset or send us a bunch of materials to prove your impact. Like, we're here. Let us know when you're ready to chat. And that can be jarring for them too, though. You don't need to talk to like our executive director right away, or you don't need a series of reports from the last 5 years. And no, we don't. And that's for us, like, deference of our power is you have the power. Like, you tell me when you need me. I'm not going to reach out and bother you because I have a report to send to my executive team. Like, I'll do that diligence myself. I'll find your impact and I'll write the report and I'll share it with you and ask if you think it represents you well. So those are just kind of some of the ways that we try to really live into that, those notions of power building and power sharing.
Thank you, Roxana. Dr. Taylor-Mendoza, now over to you. What is the role of community colleges in this, and what is your vision for what community colleges could be in this fight?
Absolutely. Well, let me provide a little bit of framework too. So we are part of a California Community College, a system. So we have 116 colleges 73 districts. We serve about 1.8 million students. I like to say, you know, we take everyone. We are an open institution, right? We get that honor to educate everyone. About 51% of CSU graduates have attended a community college, and about 29% of UC graduates have attended a community college as well. And we have about 69% of students of color. So I feel like we are very fortunate to do this work. I am part of the San Mateo County Community College system, and we are funded through property taxes, but most of the other colleges receive funding from the state or federal categorical funding as well. So I wanted to just lay that out. The reason San Mateo County is so fortunate because we get to be creative and innovative in how we move forward to support students. For me, I definitely see the system as sort of a vehicle to really increase economic mobility for students and also produce talent, right? And working with industry partners, making sure that our students have the skill set needed for industry. And so that's really, really important. So it's this beautiful partnership that I feel that we have as you talk about various sectors, right? And how we can partner to really come to terms with what does it mean to have, you know, vibrant, thriving communities, right? To thrive, not just to survive. And so that is the question in the community college that we are always asking ourselves. Some of the things that we are really excited about that we've been working on that is unique to our county is our, I don't know if you heard about SB 893. Did anyone hear about, woo, yeah, did I hear that? So we are, one of the things that we've really been focusing on in our district is what we're calling basic needs. So one thing around that SB 893 is tuition. And so come spring, we will be able to offer free tuition to all San Mateo County residents. And so we are very excited about that. I want to give honor to our Board of Trustees and our chancellors, because it takes brave leaders to continue that fight and to make things really happen. One of the other things that we've been doing is to offer transportation services. And so we have partnered with Lyft. We have our own shuttle service, because we believe that we not only want to take the college to the community, but we need to help students find a way up to us as well. One of the initiatives that I'm really excited about at the College of San Mateo is called the Coast to College. And so the coast side is Half Moon Bay and other cities like Montara and Moss Beach, that we found that students weren't just able to do the 30 to 45-minute ride to get to the College of San Mateo on the hills. We love our colleges, but they're all up on a hill, right? And so one of the things that we've done is work with a private partner to really, a donor, to really offer a space. And so come fall, we're going to have College of San Mateo on the coast. And so students, yes, I'm so excited. Students will be able to complete their certificate and also degree transfer as well as university transfer requirements to get there. So those are just sort of a few of the things we're doing. I want to share though, we're really intentional in our work. So we have a population of students who are undocumented. And so one of the things we've been able to do is through our efforts, do creative things, because we're community supported, is waive fees. And so undocumented students do not have to pay the resident fees, but they can pay the resident fees and not the non-resident fees. So that's something that we're really excited about. And it's just to your point of being really intentional and being strategic and understanding the population you need to serve and not trying to gloss over it or pretend it does not exist, but being brave enough to have those conversations and to go right in. And so that's what our district has been doing.
Thank you. Inspiring indeed. Okay, so our phenomenal timekeeper, Cho, just told me 2 minutes. So here's what I'm going to ask you. This is a lightning round. You've got a captive audience here of around 500 people. What is one thing you can ask folks to do to join the fight towards a more just and equitable Silicon Valley? And I'll start with you, Dr. Taylor-Mendoza.
Connect with your local community college, for sure. Skyline College, Kenyatta College, and College of San Mateo.
Only one. Okay, I'll do more than one. One I would say is just look inward. I don't think that we are going to make progress on this issue if we don't acknowledge while we're representing these industries up here, we are people first and foremost, that by nature of the systems we have been trained to operate within, we have attachments to hoarding and absorbing and keeping power for ourselves. And I think if you don't do that self-assessment and do that self-work on a regular basis to liberate yourself from that need for, that strive for maximizing power, being able to share it or redistribute it or even frankly understand it is a moot point, right? Representing my company would not be possible if I didn't have that deep kind of inward reflection. And so I would ask that you all take the time to do that for yourselves. And you don't have to do it alone. It can be uncomfortable to navigate. But if you can find a partner to turn to and say, hey, how are my behaviors and my actions or the language that I use or the way that I show up around you tied to power? Like, might you reflect that back to me? It doesn't have to be a lone exercise. So I'm always here to help and highly recommend folks do that soon.
Thank you, Roxana.
And maybe riffing off of that, I think one thing about equity is a lot of people come to me and they say, I work on equity because I like to help others. And I think in that introspection to consider, if you have said that, if you are saying that, not to feel any shame, but to also think about a different vision. If you could truly envision a place where every person could reach their full potential, how many Sistine Chapels would we have? How many problems could we solve? How many cancers could we cure? What would humanity look like? And let that be your guide for how you engage in equity work in a way that's meaningful to you. And don't forget government in equity work. We are here.
There are institutions that have incredible resources. That internal introspection about understanding the power that you have is really important, and realizing that we have the opportunity to be able to have a vision around that, but none of that comes to fruition if you don't put yourself on the line. How do you leverage your positional power and influence in your roles with whatever you've learned about yourself and whatever resources you have and you bring to the table to show up in solidarity with people that are struggling and suffering every day in this community? That is what you're called to do, and we're calling you in and not calling you out, because that's what's going to make change happen. So solidarity is a practice, it's a sacrifice, and it's powerful, and that power is in all of you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. I wish I know we recorded that, and I'm so appreciative of that. Thank you for the work you do every day to really build a more just, equitable, diverse, vibrant Silicon Valley for us. So please join me in a huge round of applause for our panel.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, let's leverage our power, be in solidarity with community, and let's build more Sistine Chapels. That's what I like. Another round of applause, please. We're gonna, all right, thank you. If you'd like to connect with any of them, they'll be around right after the program finishes, so please don't go anywhere. Our next speakers, I'm really excited for this conversation. He is the executive chairman and co-founder of Ripple, and in his personal capacity, he also supports climate change through Change the Code, not the planet. Ripple, as he's the co-founder, is technology that acts both as a cryptocurrency and a digital payment for financial transactions all over the world. And Chris Larsen, who will be joining us, will be in conversation with our CEO and President Nicole Taylor to talk a little bit about how can we build resilience? How can we advance equity through these many different mechanisms, especially with cryptocurrency? So as we redesign the stage, thank you guys for doing so. Woo! Thank you, gentlemen. Please welcome to the stage Chris and Nicole.
Well, thank you for being here, Chris.
Thanks, Nicole.
Yes,
Good to be here.
I'm going to read a little bit about you.
Uh-oh.
I know. This is great. So it's after 5. We said we should actually probably put the bottle of wine in between us and have real talk. But so I'm thrilled to be here with Chris Larsen. As Manny said, Chris is the executive chairman and co-founder of the locally based blockchain payment system company, Ripple. We'll explain what that all means in a minute. Chris co-founded Ripple in 2012 to use blockchain technology and digital assets to enable financial institutions to send money across borders instantly and reliably. Prior to Ripple, Chris co-founded and served as the CEO of Prosper, a peer-to-peer lending marketplace, and Ohlone, one of America's first online mortgage lending service providers. Chris is also a fund holder at the Community Foundation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A social innovator and a dedicated philanthropist. So as you can imagine, I'm thrilled to be in conversation with Chris today to dive more into his personal philanthropy and discuss the potential for cryptocurrency to help communities build financial resilience and take on social challenges and achieve equity, which is what we're here for today. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So before we dive into all of that, what do you think about the last panel, and what did you hear that inspires you in your philanthropy as you think about your path forward?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for focusing on equity and inclusion and diversity. I mean, these are core values, I think, that we all hold dear, we do. But I do think, this is really hard work. And the hard part is actually not in having the core value. The hard part is the tactics and strategy. And, I spent a lot of time on climate change, right?
Right.
And, if I look at what the devastation that's going to have from climate change to the poorest people in the world, which goes straight to equity, the poorest people in the world are going to feel the brunt of this, right? 1,700 people just died in Pakistan from flooding that clearly was global warming. We're going to multiply that by 100 when you look at what's going on in Africa today.
Right.
So we've got to solve this, and we don't have much time. But then you see what's going on in organizations like the Sierra Club. I don't know if you guys have been following that. Just tearing themselves apart, not over the core values. All the people there have the core value of equity and inclusion, but on the tactics. And what is that doing? That is an organization that was shutting down coal mines all over the country, and they're less effective now. So who is that hurting? So this is hard, and we have to start looking at it like it is really hard, and we got to be a lot more diplomatic, frankly. And another thing that's going on, one of the areas in climate we're spending a lot of time on, is how do we solve the left-right fracture? Climate has now become another culture war.
Yeah.
And, the fact that there was not a single Republican voting for the IRA bill, which was a fantastic start, huge progress, but not a single Republican. So if the Republicans take back the House, you're not going to have another bill for years and years. We got to change that. And the only way we're going to do that is we've got to have much more dialogue. We got to be much more diplomatic on how we talk about this stuff.
Right.
Or, great, we're all going to be self-satisfied that we got this core value, and we're going to make no progress. In fact, we're going to go backwards like the Sierra Club has.
Right.
So that's the way I'm trying to think about it. And there is some silver lining going on. You have groups now on the right that are starting to focus on climate. There's some awesome groups that we support. ClearPath is one of them. Another, the American Conservation Coalition, Benji Backer, who's running that, trying to get Republicans to focus on climate.
Right.
Another group called the Evangelical Environmental Network. So there are groups out there, but, and of course the problem is on the right, too many people in denial, but too many people on the left who are not opening lanes to welcome people into a bigger tent on climate.
Right.
So that's the way we're trying to think about it.
Right. So, we heard in this last panel this idea of power building and power shifting. So as you think about these divides, how does that strike you? How do we open the tent so people that we need to get in come in, but also recognize who's most impacted, who's most hurt by our current policies.
So I think it's finding small steps that we can agree on. Like in any really difficult negotiation, right? The number one rule, and we've done a bunch of this over the years, right? Number one rule is you list out all the really hard problems, right? So you get 15 really hard problems. And then you order them in minor and major, right? And solve the minor ones first, right? Because then you get like some alignment, and then you get this kind of desire to get to the finish line, right? And that kind of, I don't know, that's a perfect analogy, but I think that's, in climate, on this left-right split,
Right.
which is devastating.
Right.
We will not fix this until we fix that, right? So we actually think this is one of the highest leverage areas for us to put some of our philanthropic resources. But we've got to open lanes and allow for the small steps. So do we have to frame it differently? Like, this is a huge business opportunity. Is that going to get some folks involved Like, do we want to kill oil companies as another objective? Because if we do that, we're just going to spin our wheels. And who's that going to hurt? Again, it's going to hurt the people most vulnerable. How about instead finding ways of inviting them in? Maybe it's start with renewable fuels, which would be, essentially zero-emission fuels as a way of maintaining some of their assets until they can make the transition, faster. Because what the oil companies are doing, they actually all see what's happening here. They are changing, but they're slow walking.
Yeah, not fast enough.
Yeah, they want this to last 50 years instead of 10 years.
Right.
So we could complain about it all we want. Is that going to help? Or do we try to find ways of opening lanes?
Right.
And so I think it's all about dialogue, it's all about diplomacy, and the way we use our language, I think, is really important.
Well, and as I can say, as a person of color and a woman of color, it really matters to have a white man in those rooms speaking truth to other white men who make these decisions. So thank you. And by whatever means necessary, so that you can help bring them in and shift minds and attitudes so that those who are most vulnerable can be helped, please keep doing that, Chris. Please, because you get to be in rooms that I don't get to be in. So thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I do want to shift to crypto. So, okay, so
do we have to?
Yeah, well, I know, just a little bit, because there was a reason why you started Ripple. There's a reason why you launched XRP, and I believe that you still believe in those fundamental reasons why you started it. And that whole thing that I talked about, blockchain technology and all of that, that's related to cryptocurrency, which many people don't understand. So before we get into why you co-founded and launched the company and what you really believe is possible, 3-minute elevator speech to lay people who don't know about blockchain, who don't code, who don't do anything. Please, what the heck is cryptocurrency?
So the way we look at it, the internet itself, which has obviously transformed this place that we call home, that was about sending information, right? Blockchain and crypto, at the end of the day, it's just about recording information. Because once you can record information, now you can have ledgers that hold value in a reliable way without having a central, authority. So why is that important? That leads now to kind of a second internet. So the way we think about crypto and blockchain is this is really nothing more than a second internet, and it's an internet of value. So now either it's new things of value like cryptocurrencies, or other things of value, existing currencies or assets or anything of value can now move anywhere in the world instantaneously with access to all. And the access to all, I think, is one of the most exciting parts, right?
So on the second internet, any kind of asset can move.
Instead of information, which is actionable, this is now value, which is more actionable, right? So in some ways, it's maybe even a more important leg of the stool. And we kind of see it as really the completion of globalization, and globalization has not worked all that well. And I would say it's because globalization is incomplete. And until you have an internet of value, imagine somebody in the developing world, right, who probably has a smartphone because you have an internet of data, so they can see the world on their smartphone. They can ship things that they're making anywhere. You can move a shirt all the way across the world for 4 cents. Why is that? It's because we have an interoperable goods shipping system. It's the shipping container, right? I love shipping containers, right? But that was created in the 50s. That was kind of a goods internet.
Right.
Everything's interoperable. And the Gates Foundation does a great job of talking about this, right? That person needs to be able to send as little as 50 cents cross-border to now use the information on their phone and ship the thing that they're making and to be a participant in the global economy. And without an internet of value, there's about 2 billion people in the world who can't do that. So how frustrating is that to see it, but you can't execute, and not because of the expense of moving a good, but because of the crazy idea that a digital thing, which money is so expensive and has so little, is blocked from so many people. So that's really the power of what's going on here.
Wow. Okay, so talk about why then. Why did you launch Ripple? Why XRP? Why do you feel crypto can actually open that door? Access for all.
Yeah, because this is really the infrastructure of how money and value will move around the world. So again, analogous to internet protocols, the internet protocol that fundamentally changed the way the world communicates.
Right.
And before that, communication was really expensive and cut off to billions of people. And so that fundamentally changed things. And what did that do? It created a Cambrian explosion of companies, nonprofits, ways of living, some bad, obviously. We're still living with some of those bad aspects. Some of them getting worse, but tremendous progress, right? And that's what's going on here. So it's important to separate the cryptocurrency part, which gets all the headlines, from the, and I'll use the word blockchain, although technically not all these protocols have blockchains, but push that aside. But that's the infrastructure. And it's the infrastructure, I think, that is maybe even more powerful. And then the cryptocurrency part plays a role. It's just because it's just a different thing. It's a thing of value, not attached to a government. It's sort of basic and low level. I don't see that as a replacement for like the dollar and the UN. In fact, I think the dollar gets stronger in that world. But it's kind of it's a lubricant for the global economy. It's a different thing, and it's helpful. But too many people in the industry, they overhype it. Like, you know, they talk it like it's, curing everything. That's like most technologies. Ignore 80%, 90% of it. But there's some real great things that are happening in there. And they usually take decades to really unfold.
So let's talk then about that, the darker side, because it's in the media. And I think the Financial Times put out a report that Black American investors have been hit especially hard during the crypto crash because of their higher exposure to digital assets. I can attest to that, some of my cousins. And then recently we saw some celebrities irresponsibly endorsing and touting crypto schemes, which disproportionately, again, harms people who are uneducated about the field. So, what is your take on the controversies, and how do you think, what are ways that the industry can be more helpful, can be more responsible when these kind of things are happening?
Yeah, so definitely, like any technology, some bad things, lots of good things. Maybe though, when you talk about value, you talk about data, right? Lots of bad things can happen with data, but it's still data. The data has to be sold or monetized in a different way. Talk about value though, the value itself is right there, right? So that can lead to maybe even more bad things, right? And I think the mistake that the industry, but the whole society has focused on, they focus too much on the crypto asset. And again, you had this kind of crazy competition by all kinds of companies that are trying to build, their businesses, and mostly with good intention. But I think that led to too much focus on the asset. And then, of course, looking backwards, in the last decade, if you got in 10 years ago, and by the way, you guys got in like 10 years ago.
We did.
These guys were the first ones to accept
we did
crypto.
to accept,
And
yes.
I mean, You probably got tons of crypto 10 years ago, and then like 50x, 100x. Wasn't like 10% of your balance sheet at one point crypto?
Yes.
I mean, that's incredible.
When I came on board, yes.
Hats off to you guys, right? So that
it is not that now.
And that's good. That's a good thing. But I think too much focus on that, and maybe because it was money and its value, and that's sort of human nature, not enough on the infrastructure building. The first internet, that's all you could focus on, because that was the big thing. I also think we have a problem with lack of regulation. We need, and this is a little bit of the catch-22 in America, you've got a combination of a very aggressive sort of power struggle on who's going to regulate the industry, but at the same time, no clear rules. It's like the worst possible combination, right? So you need really clear rules that might have prevented some of the overselling and the hype, which did hurt people, but still opening the lanes for the innovation over the next decades and making sure that the U.S. leads that. And right now, we're at risk of losing that.
Wow, wow, which just paves the way for more bad.
Right.
So on to the positives then. So what are the biggest opportunities of crypto in creating and contributing to social change?
So, I mean, I think the biggest one is the obvious one on cross-border payments, right? So if you look at how much money is moving between borders, most of that is the poorest in society who are trying to maybe move the unbanked or the underbanked, maybe trying to move money to their family overseas. You know, like 7% is being chewed up in the industry of moving money around the world, which is just kind of crazy.
Wow.
So that needs to fundamentally change. We're using still technologies built in the 70s. It's analogous to how data used to work before the internet. And so there's a massive now kind of restructuring of that infrastructure. We're playing a role in that. On an enterprise level, we think that's actually where you're going to make the most impact. Wow. Let's bring in the existing financial institutions, banks, the new wallet providers, right?
Yes.
Because what's cool now about this infrastructure is a wallet provider now, which by the way, if you look at a place like Bangladesh, most people there are moving their money using wallets, not banks. Like 35 million plus, right?
Wow.
Bcash is an example of a great app. So you couldn't use the old systems with those kinds of technologies, but with these new systems, it's just a way better way for this to work. So that, I think, gets right to the heart of kind of a key use to the most vulnerable in the world. So I like that category a lot. Then I think that this whole idea of tokenization of all assets in the world is really exciting, whether that's going to be artists, whether that's going to be carbon credits. And by the way, the carbon credit thing is really exciting for equity as well. So there's going to be a huge, we got to suck like 500 billion tons of carbon out of the air just to get back to where we were. Incredible work to do there. But one of them is going to have really good functioning carbon credit markets. Which so far have not been markets. You know, they say they're not markets, they're flea markets. They just don't work very well.
Right.
But blockchain will play a really key role in that and in making these markets radically transparent. Now, why is that good? Let's say a farmer in Africa or Latin America can now change the way they're working their soils. There's some really cool companies working on things like this, like MyAgro, for example. Change the way they work their soils to be sequestering more carbon and then go sell those for credits. That's happening already, but people are being ripped off, right? They're being offered too little of a price, and then it's being resold. So in a radically transparent market, everybody can see. Those farmers now could see what's the real price for the carbon I'm sequestering. So that's an exciting future, and you're solving two problems at once.
So let's bring it closer to home. So there's many nonprofits out here, and they may have donors who want to give crypto. They want to figure out, should we be getting into the crypto game? How can these decentralized platforms, so really the infrastructure, really help nonprofits unlock more capital that's held in crypto?
Well, I think I think there's no question they should do it, right? And you guys went through this too. Not only did you see the kind of increase in value, but obviously the wealth created within the industry. If you are accepting it, you're more likely, you're going to get those flows, right? Because donating crypto actually, from a tax perspective, is actually very attractive, right? So that's a good thing. So no question there. And it's actually really easy now. Coinbase can set up a nonprofit. Super easy. That's a great company, and recommend them. But I think the other thing is there are use cases, if you look at organizations like Give Directly,
Yeah.
Mercy Corp, for example, have done a lot of, Conservation International, have done a lot of really interesting thinking. I think a lot of it is still in the kind of let's check it out phase.
Right.
But there's all kinds of really interesting things. Once you get into the industry and you're accepting it, you learn a lot.
Right.
Whether an NFT for protecting coral reefs in Palau, for example, is going to be an interesting thing. Whether supporting refugees in some of the war zones that Mercy Corp works with by giving crypto directly, it just opens up a whole new area. And I think it's good, a good exercise anyway for your organizations to kind of get into these new things.
Now, so for those nonprofits, what are some do's and don'ts that they should keep in mind as they think about getting into this whole world?
Well, I think use the infrastructure that's already there. The good news is this is not 10 years ago. When you guys were doing this, you guys were, it was definitely the Wild West.
Yes.
Like, where do you custody it? Where do you keep your private keys? I mean, you guys were pretty bold. Now it's pretty turnkey, right? Again, an organization like Coinbase, they can set you up. They can do the custody. They can do the trading. Super safe. So yeah, I just wouldn't do it on your own. Don't hold your own keys. Don't do that. But I would engage and just try not to get spun up in all the hype.
Yeah.
That always happens, but probably in crypto more so simply because it's money.
Right.
And it's value. And that is exciting, and it's also very dangerous. And,
right.
But I wouldn't be afraid of it.
Yeah, yeah. And we're now dealing 15 to 16 different types. And when we get it, we sell it because we want to be able for the donors to give the grants and get
And pretty easy to do, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but we've been at it for a while. But there are now ways, like as you say, that nonprofits can get into this, do it safely, and get higher volume, maybe low amounts, but higher volume because the infrastructure exists that didn't before. Now, this may be an odd question, but for those who are investors out there, I'm thinking about some of our donors in the audience, how can they engage with crypto influencers, crypto founders, the industry in terms of helping to push the social change agenda?
Well, I'm not sure I deal with influencers. I just feel, I know that whole, it's a crazy, like you said about Hollywood getting into it.
Yes.
That was just not good, right?
No.
And part of that was driven by a lot of greenwashing going on with some very, very, kind of crazy amounts of carbon producing. If you look at Bitcoin, for example, and there was a bunch of greenwashing going on. Jack Dorsey's thing on Earth Day a year and a half ago, literally saying Bitcoin mining, which by the way, using waste coal plants in Pennsylvania, crazy. But literally saying that that's the key to a renewable future. Right. And I think that's actually what attracted a lot of the Hollywood folks who are very climate focused. And a bunch of them that were working on climate, and all of a sudden, they had permission to kind of get into this horrible climate kind of asset. So anyway, maybe stay away from the influencers. Focus on solving problems. I mean, that's at the end of the day. That's what this is all about.
There you go. There you go. So how would you like to leave this audience and the audience who will be watching in terms of how they need to be thinking about the future of crypto, the future of crypto with social change, with the social sector in general? What message do you really want to leave with them?
Well, I'm going to go back to where we started, and we have got to find a way of working with people who don't agree with a lot of the things that we're thinking.
Yeah.
When it comes to equity, when it comes to climate, when it comes to San Francisco, right? We spent a lot of time trying to, help San Francisco. I think it's all the same problem. We're not talking enough, and we're not talking diplomatically enough, and we're just pushing people away. And if we keep doing that, we're just not going to, things are going to go south a lot more than they are now. And we could totally solve these problems.
Right.
All super solvable. But that's what I would say.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nicole. We're almost there, folks. Almost done. I love the conversation. I think, for me personally, the use of cryptocurrency for remittances, greater access to banking, really important in terms of, how communities and communities of color can use, XRP or any of the other cryptocurrencies. But before Nicole comes back and gives her State of the Community Foundation, we'd love to preview for you our video, which actually rebrands our identity. Similar to what we've been working on for the last couple of years on our strategic plan and how do we engage with communities. We actually put this video together. It'll give you a feel. It's really brand new, and so tell us what you think. We want to get your input and your support for this. So here we go.
What gives me hope about Silicon Valley are the very people that I get to engage with every day. It's the people in community who are working with their neighbors and making things happen and making incredible impact. There are people still out there who are doing good and want to do good. They still want to build up their communities. They want to help their neighbors. The people who care, the people who haven't given up. They haven't given up on themselves and they haven't given up on each other. My top priorities when I first became president and CEO of the Community Foundation were, one, to build trust with all of our stakeholders, community leaders, donors, public officials, all of our constituents. And the second thing was to put the community back in the Community Foundation. Building community, advancing community, and where everyone here can thrive.
Something that we really appreciate from the foundation is this holistic approach, not just investing in one thing or the other, but actually the whole safety network that it takes in order for everyday people to be engaged in public life. What the reality in the Bay, and especially in the peninsula in Silicon Valley, is that the crisis is now. We're in the middle of a real crisis in terms of housing, immigration, displacement. It requires long-term funding and a constant dialogue to figure out how do we change what we're doing, what's working, what's not working. That's really unique and it's rooted in relationship.
Understanding the community. That's the biggest challenge and oftentimes why corporations, government systems aren't that effective in engaging the community, because oftentimes they develop policies and practices absent of the community's input. You have to have trusted partners that you can depend on, that when they say they're going to do something, you know they're going to do it. It's about trust.
The pandemic laid bare some deep health and economic racial disparities in our community. Those existed before the pandemic. Unless we come together, those deep disparities are still going to be here. What I love about the Community Foundation is that they are helping real people on the ground here in Silicon Valley. We have the resources, the capacity, the diversity, and the innovation here to tackle any of our community's problems.
What is the thing that touches your heart, or that you feel in your gut that there's something wrong about that one thing or that one issue? What is that? Or what are those things? Because that's where we start. Thanks for your patience as we got that going. That was very cool. So thank you again to the City of Mountain View and for the staff here at the Center for Performing Arts for having us in this terrific venue. Next year, we will be having this annual meeting in San Mateo County. Our staff is actually scouting sites over the next few months. So if you have ideas about great places we should think about, just send a note to one of our staff members. I also want to thank our sponsors again, our champion sponsors, Alaska Airlines, David and Lucille Packard Foundation, and Matthew Ives with Morgan Stanley. Your support enabled today's conversations, the connections, the camaraderie, the energy outside was just incredible before we all came in. So thank you. And I want to thank the panelists again for the conversation that we had with Gina. I want to thank Chris for he said I was easy on him. But I was like, this wasn't a hit job. People really do want to understand about blockchain and crypto, and can it actually help open a world to people who are unbanked and who cannot move assets the way that many of the rest of us can. So I'm just was inspired by all of the different sectors that we had come together today to talk about equity and to talk about what is happening in our valley, and which is a microcosm, as we heard some of what Chris said, of what's happening around the world, and particularly to communities that are the most vulnerable, who usually are communities of color. So it's just an honor to be here with you in person and to have these conversations. On the video, you'll notice that the look and feel is a little different than the look and feel of this slide here. That is because in a few weeks, we're going to be launching our new brand and a new website. And for the donors in the room, wait for it, a new donor portal. Yes, I know. We're very excited about this. Really, we're weeks away. Our team is really thrilled to be rolling this out because we know this new technology is going to change the way that we can serve everyone, serve our donors, serve our community members, and serve our grantees. It's just going to allow us to have even more impact and really get to the real work rather than stumbling through clunky technology. So very excited about that. You saw what I said in the video, and hopefully you heard it throughout this evening, that we have been on a mission for, since I took on this role in December 2018 to put the community back in the Community Foundation. I really hope that that is how you are experiencing our Community Foundation now, and that you know that I was serious when I first said that. I think it was at a Life Moves event. I was on stage being interviewed and I said it and people were applauding, and I didn't realize how revolutionary that was. And I just want to say on behalf of our entire foundation, from the board members to our staff, that we are here and we mean it. And we are going to continue to be this community's foundation, and we want to continually improve who we are so that we can have the most impact, so that we can serve the nonprofit sector the way they deserve to be served and supported, and that we can serve the donors and the corporations here who want to give philanthropically and serve them and you in ways that you deserve it. So know that we are serious about this. So, So back in 2019, way back then, doesn't that seem like a decade ago? Back in 2019, we embarked on a strategic planning process, and we landed on 4 key pillar goals, which serve as guiding principles. And as I say them, I hope they ring true based on what you've heard this evening or this afternoon. The first pillar is to reduce systemic disparities. The second is to help create a strong and engaged community. The third is to build a culture of effective philanthropy, not just at the foundation, but for this region. And the final pillar is to become a trusted and enduring institution for this community. And just as we were about to launch that plan, the pandemic hit. We were very glad we finished the plan because we actually ended up using that as our North Star. We began living it, and we used it to meet the moment. We launched 7 COVID funds that raised $66 million. And yeah, it was incredible to see how people stepped up. Those funds went directly to help people most affected by the pandemic. It helped for food assistance, housing assistance, financial assistance for low-income families, for small businesses who were shuttered, for helping child care providers who could no longer work, and providing low barrier to entry funding for nonprofits. We worked with our donors, and we asked them to give more from their donor advice funds and to give more locally. We centered the voices of our communities. We heard that in the panel over and over again. We wanted to trust their expertise. They knew their communities. They know their communities. And we used their knowledge to guide our strategies and our priorities. So in short, we did what we think we do best: bring people together for the greater good. And despite the many difficulties and challenges that we all collectively faced, there are some moments of real successes and wins. In 2021, we broke our grant-making records, and this is because of our donors and our corporate partners. Last year, we gave out $2.27 billion. Yeah, it was mind-blowing. $777 million of that stayed right here in the Bay Area, and $201 million of that stayed right here in our 2 counties, the most that our foundation had given in those 2 counties. And we're on track to beat that record this year, I'm just saying. Right. Today, the nonprofits who are here, the community leaders are here, their donors, corporate partners who are here, thank you for making that possible. We are proud to share those numbers because they represent you, your hard work, your philanthropy, the work that's being done on the ground. Again, it takes this entire village for us to be who we can be for you. One of the things that I don't need to tell you is that the last 2.5 years have shown the gross inequities that exist in our valley and how acute those inequities became, or at least that we saw them. We couldn't unsee them during the pandemic. Last year, or earlier this year actually, Joint Venture Silicon Valley issued a study that said 92% of our region's wealth is owned by the top quarter of the population. The lowest quarter only owns 1.4%. That's our region. That's our 2 counties. And then when you disaggregate for race and ethnicity, those disparities are magnified. Our vision, this community's foundation's vision for our community, is one that is united to create an equitable, economically secure, and vibrant future for all of us, all of us. Now, in order to achieve this, we need to make sure that everybody, regardless of race, gender identity, socioeconomic status, citizenship status, has the power to make decisions about their own lives and to build their own futures. It was the power building concept that Poncho was phenomenal at explaining. There are so many organizations and so many community leaders in our region that are doing this work right now. We believe our role is to support them. Our role is to shine the light on this work that's being done and to ensure that they have the resources to get the work done, to continue to make the impact that they're making. I'm proud to report that this work is well on our way. How are we doing this? Well, we took some lessons from the pandemic, and we also relied on our strategic plan and the direction we've been on. First, Manny had, right at the beginning, talked about our Community Advisory Council. These are amazing individuals. Right at the beginning of the pandemic, we convened over 20 community leaders of color because we needed to hear from them what was happening in their communities. We needed to understand what was happening as we all went inside. These community leaders were on the ground. They couldn't work from home. They were serving our communities. After the height of the pandemic, we kept that council going, and it will be with us. They give us guidance, real talk. They hold our feet to the fire. They keep me accountable. They keep us honest. And they ensure that we know what's really happening in our communities. They are an incredible group of individuals, and this speaks to what it takes to build a strong and engaged community, to help empower and give their voices a platform. And it also speaks to our goal of becoming a trusted and enduring institution. They trusted us. They came, on Zoom, and would tell us what was really happening, and it allowed us to act. Another lesson we learned is, and I should have realized this early, we live in Silicon Valley. When I say I'm gonna raise a fund, most people in Silicon Valley know what that means. Well, we learned in the pandemic that we are great aggregators of capital. We make it easy for people to give to really hard issues, and we make it easy for the nonprofits to get the money. So we did this at first with the 7 funds that raised $66 million. And then in the past 2 years, we launched 2 additional funds to really increase the capacity and effectiveness of organizations working on structural racism, again, one of our pillars about reducing systemic disparities. The first was the California Black Freedom Fund, which we launched in partnership with several foundations right after the murder of George Floyd in summer 2020. And it has since raised $63 million towards a $100 million goal. And given $26 million in grants to support 95 Black-led organizations across the state. And they're not stopping. And then in late 2021 with the Castellano Family Foundation and their report about the status of Latinx-led organizations and how little dollars, philanthropic dollars they get, we launched the Latinx Cell Fund. And since late 2021, we've raised $4 million towards a $10 million goal. And that's specifically for our 2 counties. And the initial grant-making round funded 36 Latinx-led nonprofits, some of whom were here. I saw some of the executive directors here. And again, more to come, more to come. We launched community action grants also in 2021. We learned that we had to get money out fast. And it couldn't just be, we were beyond the people needed emergency food, they needed, after everything had shut down, that there were issues and areas around our region that needed our attention. We heard this from our Community Advisory Council, we heard this from other community leaders. So we said, okay, we're gonna have short, simpler applications, get the money out, general operating support for issues like arts and culture, the environment, local news and journalism, and faith-based community efforts. So in the first year, we granted $2.7 million this way. 80% of those grants went to organizations led by people of color. 74% had budgets under $1 million. Those organizations are almost never on the radar of foundations. So again, we are currently in an RFP round. Go to our website if you are out there and you don't know. We have second rounds of these grants that are getting ready. So make sure you apply by, I think it's the Friday. So make sure you go to our website. And then this year we also launched a multi-sector effort, which we saw on the panel, the importance of different sectors, with Stanford University, a partnership called Equity Forward, and it is about systems change. Again, we want to shift policies, relationships, power dynamics that perpetuate the inequities, and we want to make sure all of the sectors are engaged. We're looking at how do we actually narrow the wealth gap in our region? How do we envision a community where housing is affordable for everyone, where every employee is paid a thriving wage, meaning they can thrive in this region, and where every person has the economic mobility to grow and succeed. So you're going to be hearing more about that in the next few months. And again, this is not just about us. This is about all of our partnerships and all of the sectors that need to come to the table on this. It's the entire village. And we are at an inflection point in our region. Again, I don't have to tell you this. We cannot keep with the status quo. That really wasn't working before the pandemic, and it's not working now as whatever phase we're in with this pandemic, endemic, whatever we're calling it, it's still not working. We have to do things differently. And I am hoping but like me, you believe change is possible. And I'm also hoping by the fact that you showed up here, and for those of you watching on video that you're watching this, that you want to be part of this change, that you want to understand, how do I step up and meet the moment if I'm a philanthropist, or if I'm a company, or if I'm a nonprofit leader? Who should I be partnering with? How do I access more resources? What can I do to ensure that the people I serve are getting what they need? It's going to take all of us together. In the last 3.5 years, your community foundation, us, made the commitment to meet the moment for this community. We just didn't realize it was going to involve a pandemic and the murder of a Black man in front of our eyes and all sorts of fires and all sorts of things. But we knew that this is why we are here. We are here for you. And we want each of you to dig deep and figure out how you can do this. And if you're sitting there and trying to figure out, okay, that's a lot, there are a lot of issues, how do I get engaged? Where can I start? Well, I'm going to speak specifically to those who have the desire and the means. We would like you to give to our Community Opportunity Fund. This fund invests in individuals, organizations, and movements trying to do the work we've learned about today. In the past, we used this fund ourselves. We would fund it with $1 million from our endowment, and that would fund small grants, opportunity grants, urgent needs around the two counties. Today, we are expanding that fund in terms of what it supports, and we are inviting people in to join us in the funding. By 2023, we want to raise $20 million for this fund. It will help support efforts like the Latinx All Fund, like our Community Action Grants program, like the Movement and Power Building work that you heard Poncho talk about, like Equity Forward and the California Black Freedom Fund, and more. This $20 million will make it easy for you to figure out how to get into the equity game, not the investing equity game that most of Silicon Valley thinks about when they say the word equity, but real equity, and building a region where every one of us thrives, where our neighbors, the neighbors living in those RVs, the neighbors living under the tents, every one of us thrives. This fund is just the beginning, and we wanted to make it easy because we realized that that works really well in Silicon Valley. Make it easy for you to figure out how to help, and we will make it very easy for the nonprofits to get the funds from this. So, and because it's a pooled fund, you benefit from our contributions and the contributions of other donors and corporations. So visit the website. Quick thing, the donor portal will be offline starting end of business tomorrow because next Tuesday the new one will be up. So make your contribution today or tomorrow. And if you don't get to it, we will definitely be emailing you after the new donor portal's up so you can just make a transfer from your current donor advice fund on over to this fund. Thank you all again for being here in person, and for those of you who couldn't be here for watching us and being part of what I'm taking as a commitment to make this region better. It is going to take all of us, and it is a pleasure and an honor to be in this with you. Thank you, and see you next year in San Mateo County.